Hi, I'm Serafina. My son called 911 on Christmas Eve, not for help, but to order a giant pepperoni pizza. He was 8, alone, staying with my sister. The dispatcher almost hung up, until he whispered, "She said angels without wings can't run away." That's when the police went cold. They walked in, and what they found made them freeze. I was hundreds of miles away thinking he was safe, but I was wrong. They didn't just steal my trust, they tried to break him. And when he spoke the truth, they tried to silence him. But this time, the world listened. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this? And where are you? Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have believed him or called it a child's imagination? The smell of antiseptic lingered in the air as I leaned against the nurse's station, thumb hovering over the screen of my phone. I'd been trying to FaceTime Lucas for the last 15 minutes. No answer. Again. I checked the clock above the supply cabinet, 8:40 p.m., Christmas Eve. Snow was piling up outside the hospital windows, thick and blinding. The emergency room had been swamped for most of the afternoon, but now it was eerily quiet. I should have been reading The Polar Express to my son by the fireplace, not charting IV drips on my 5th 12-hour shift in a row. I tried Seraphine's phone, straight to voicemail. Again. She knew how much this meant to Lucas. His first Christmas since he started drawing little Santa pictures in July. I had begged her to let him stay with her this weekend. My older sister, the one who reminded everyone she led the church's women's ministry. She'd said yes, reluctantly. I owed her, apparently. "I'll keep him for the night," she had said, voice clipped. "But you should know, Serafina, Christmas isn't really for children without fathers. It's about God, not fantasy." I remembered those words now, like a splinter I thought I'd pulled years ago, but still felt when I moved a certain way. Then my phone buzzed. A call. Not from Seraphine. It was Leon, an old friend from high school who now worked with the county sheriff's department. "Serafina," he said. No greeting, just urgency in his voice. "Your son just called 911. My knees buckled slightly, and I clutched the edge of the counter. "What? What do you mean? Lucas, where is he?" "Still at your sister's. But listen, it wasn't a prank. We got the call. The dispatcher put it through to us because of what he said." I didn't move. I didn't breathe, just listened as Leon read the transcript. It started off quiet, barely audible. I don't know if I'm supposed to call, but my mom is hungry," Lucas had whispered. "She's scared." "Where is your mom?" the dispatcher asked. "She couldn't come. She's at work. I just wanted to help." Then silence, just his breathing. They tried to keep him on the line, but he'd gone quiet. "We sent a unit over. No one answered the door," Leon said. "So they entered. Serafina, it's not good." Officer Mara and Officer Daniels stood in the doorway of Seraphine's neat 2-story colonial. Snow coated the shrubs outside. The house looked peaceful, lights on, Christmas wreath on the front door. But no adult came when they knocked, again and again. "Dispatch, we're breaching entry, no response. Child possibly alone inside." The door gave with one shoulder shove. Inside was quiet. Cold. The furnace wasn't running, but the oven was on. Door cracked slightly, as if someone was using it for heat. The living room was untouched, but as they stepped into the kitchen, they saw him. Lucas sat on the tiled floor, knees to his chest, 2 towels wrapped around his tiny frame. His hair was a little damp. Next to him sat a crumpled napkin. In his lap, a drawing. The smell of old food, dirty dishes, and something sharp, metallic, hung in the air. Officer Daniels crouched gently. "Hey, buddy, I'm Officer Daniels. You okay?" Lucas blinked slowly. "Are you bringing pizza?" "No," Daniels said softly. "But we're here to help you. Where's your aunt?" Lucas looked toward the back door. "She said I talked too much. Then she left. Said she had church. That was, I don't know, a long time ago." "How long, sweetheart?" Officer Mara asked. Lucas rubbed his sleeve across his nose. 3 sleeps, I think." There was a click behind them. Bathroom door from the outside, locked. A clear bolt had been slid across. Daniels noted it silently. The fridge was mostly empty. A gallon of milk, expired. Some ketchup. No sign of meals. Dishes piled high. Cold soup in the sink. The heat vent in the floor had been blocked by a chair. Then Mara noticed the napkin. Lucas tried to slide it into his pocket, but she asked gently, "Can I see what you were drawing?" He hesitated, then held it up. It was a child's drawing. A giant slice of pizza with a tiny stick figure beside it, labeled in all caps, "Mom." The figure was curled up, lying down. Daniels swallowed. "We're going to call your mom, okay?" Lucas looked up. "She didn't eat either. I wanted to get her pizza too." Mara wrapped him in a soft emergency blanket. Lucas clutched the napkin and buried his face in it. Daniels stepped out to the cruiser to call it in. Possible neglect. No guardian present. House cold. Food insufficient. Minor found alone. Estimated over 48 hours. Then he dialed the number Leon gave him. My number. "Ma'am," he said as soon as I picked up, "your son is safe, but you'll want to hear what he drew." My coat was halfway on before I ended the call. I ran through the ER like I was the one bleeding. No time to explain. The charge nurse shouted after me, but I just waved wildly, keys already in my hand. Outside, snow bit at my cheeks. The cold didn't register. I slid into my car and stared through the frosted windshield. That napkin. That picture. My son hadn't called for help for himself. He was trying to feed me. I turned the ignition. "I thought my son was safe," I whispered, voice trembling. Until a napkin told the truth I should have seen coming. I hadn't even taken off my badge when I got to the station. My hospital coat was still half-zipped over my scrubs, damp from melting snow. I ran through the front doors like someone chasing their last chance, not their child, but maybe in a way it was both. Lucas was asleep in the corner of the waiting area, curled up on a plastic bench. A navy blanket with the station's emblem was draped over him, and tucked in one tiny hand was that same napkin, now wrinkled, but clutched like something sacred. I crouched beside him, brushing a few curls off his cheek. His face looked calm, but his fingers twitched. I'd know that twitch anywhere. It was the one he got during nightmares, the ones he didn't talk about. The ones I hadn't realized had names until tonight. Officer Mehra stepped over quietly. "He wouldn't sleep unless the napkin stayed with him," she said softly. "We tried to take it just to scan for fingerprints." He cried. I nodded slowly. "Where's my sister?" "She's in interview too. She's composed." Of course she was. The hallway was dim, the overhead lights flickering a bit from old wiring, or maybe just the kind of cold that finds its way into places people try to ignore. Through the one-way glass, I saw Seraphine sitting like she'd been invited for coffee, not accused of abandoning her nephew. Arms crossed, legs neatly folded, one of those thin church lady smiles fixed on her face. When I walked in, she looked me over and gave a slight tilt of her head. "Seraphina," she said calmly, "you look tired." I didn't sit. "Tell me what happened." She sighed like I was being difficult. "I had a retreat, a few women from church. I told Lucas I'd be back later that evening. He was being defiant, screaming when I told him to go to bed. I thought a few hours of silence might help." 2 days, Seraphine." "That's not true," she said, her voice still measured. "I left him food. I told him to stay inside. I had every right. You gave me permission to discipline him." "You mean when I asked if he could stay one night while I was on shift? That's not permission to vanish." Her fingers tightened on the table edge, just a little. "You've always misunderstood boundaries. The boy needs structure, not your bleeding heart." There was a knock and Officer Daniels stepped in with a small tablet in hand. "Ms. Seraphina, you asked for clarity? We have time-stamped footage from Ms. Seraphine's neighborhood." He tapped the screen. It showed Seraphine's SUV backing out of her driveway at 6:32 p.m., 2 nights ago. The next clips were from a camera mounted on the corner grocery store across the street. Her car didn't return, not once. "I parked down the block," she offered, eyes narrowing. Daniels didn't respond. Instead, he played the last clip. A view of her house from across the street. Lights stayed off. No movement. No shadows in the windows. "You weren't home, Seraphine," I said flatly. "He was alone. I prayed for him. For you. That's what you never understand." Her voice sharpened like brittle glass. "Sometimes discipline requires absence. That's what Pastor Elijah teaches. Children need silence." "Children need food," I shot back. "They need heat. They need someone to answer when they're scared. They need salvation. Don't you dare wrap what you did in Scripture." Silence. Then she smiled again. "Lucas was safe." Mara's voice from behind was lower this time. "Ma'am, this falls under child endangerment. You can't abandon a minor to fast and pray. The law doesn't work that way." Seraphine didn't blink. Outside the room, I sat on the bench just across from Lucas again. He was half awake now, his eyes glassy but quiet. In his lap was another napkin. He didn't say anything, just handed it to me. It was a sketch. A tall building, pointed at the top like the church near Seraphine's place, but there were no doors, just bricks and stained glass. Below it, scrawled in green crayon, were 5 words. "Mom?" I tried to find the key. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't understand, but because I did. He didn't mean just a physical door. A while later, I found Seraphine in the hallway, flanked by 2 officers but calm as ever. I stopped her just before the elevators. "You locked him in, then you left to feel holy." She tilted her head, chin high. "He needed quiet, and so do you. Maybe that's your problem." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "You ever silence my son again, Seraphine, and I won't be quiet either." That finally cracked her face. Just a flicker, a microsecond of something brittle behind the eyes. Then she turned away without another word. Back inside, Lucas stirred, looked up at me with a sleepy whisper. "She said if I called you, Christmas would disappear." I bent down to him, brushing his hand. "Christmas doesn't disappear, honey," I said quietly, "but some people might." And that's when I realized this wasn't the first time Seraphine had tried to erase parts of my life she didn't approve of. It was just the first time she left proof behind. 2 days passed. Snow still blanketed everything, pressed thick against windows, silencing the world like a held breath. Inside, our house was warm, but the kind of warmth that carried tension. Lucas was sleeping more, and not just from exhaustion. It was that deep kind of sleep that comes when your body finally believes it's safe, if only for a little while. I'd scheduled a checkup with Dr. Allen, our longtime pediatrician. She was one of those calm presences who never rushed, the kind of woman who'd stayed in Albany even when bigger offers came knocking. The exam room smelled like cotton balls and soap. Lucas sat quietly on the table, legs swinging. His shirt lifted just enough when he reached for my hand, and that's when Dr. Allen paused. "These marks," she said gently, "they're not from a fall." I swallowed hard. "Are they burns?" "Superficial," she said carefully, "but enough to sting. His back shows signs of exposure to high heat, maybe a space heater too close, maybe he was kept in a room without ventilation." I turned to him. "Lucas, was it cold at Aunt Seraphine's?" He didn't look at me, just shook his head once, barely. "It was too hot," he mumbled, "way too hot." I drove us home in silence, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I needed to. When we pulled into the driveway, Lucas had already dozed off again in the back seat. I lifted him out gently, carried him inside, and laid him on the couch with a blanket. While he slept, I started sorting through his duffel bag. Dirty socks, a broken pencil, a rumpled sketch of a church with windows boarded up. At the bottom, an old Nike shoebox. I lifted the lid, and there it was. Taped underneath, barely visible, was a tiny blue flash drive. The label on it said nothing, but the tape holding it in place had been scribbled on in black marker. "Don't tell." I plugged it into my laptop in the kitchen and clicked. There were 6 audio files. The first one opened with static and then a whisper. His voice. "If I record, maybe someone will believe me. Aunt S said not to cry 'cause only babies cry, but it's too hot, and I miss Mom. The second one started mid-conversation. Seraphine's voice, cold and firm. You'll sweat the devil out, Lucas. Fire cleans. You'll pray until the bad melts off. I couldn't move. The oven hummed behind me, but it felt like the only heat in the house now was rising from inside my own skin. The third recording was just Lucas crying softly, then a pause, then him whispering, I tried to be good. I really tried. I stopped breathing. The fourth recording was shorter, Seraphine's voice again, lower this time. This is what your mother never understood. Silence makes strong men, and fire makes saints. The last one, it was just breathing, faint, shaky, then the sound of something clicking, a door locking, then a long pause. I counted to 100, Lucas whispered, barely audible. I counted until I forgot what came next. I clicked pause. My hands were shaking. A sharp flash of memory cut through me. Lucas's sketch. The church with no doors. He hadn't just been drawing buildings. He was trying to say something I didn't see. I shut the laptop and stood. My breath was shallow. Every part of me ached to scream, to rip something apart, to demand answers from a world that let this happen. But there was no one to scream at. Just me. A kitchen full of silence, and a child sleeping on the couch who had counted himself into forgetting. I stepped out into the snow barefoot. The cold hit like a slap, but I didn't move, didn't flinch, let it bite. My neighbor, Mrs. Elkins, spotted me from across the street. She walked over slowly, boots crunching in the snow, holding out a pair of mine I must have left on the porch the night before. You okay, honey? I nodded, but I wasn't. No, but I will be. I know what I need to do. That night, after Lucas was tucked into bed, I returned to the kitchen. I downloaded every recording onto a backup drive and printed out a transcript of each one. I checked it twice. I knew they wouldn't believe emotion, but they couldn't ignore timestamps. Her voice, the evidence. I packed the flash drive into a Ziploc, labeled it with the date. Then I sat at the dining room table and stared at nothing for a long time. Finally, I whispered to myself, You think this is over, Seraphine? You haven't even heard me speak yet. And then I walked straight into Child Protective Services with a USB drive that could burn her fake halo to ashes. I didn't sleep much that night. Even after backing up the files and printing the transcripts, I kept waking every hour, my mind circling the same question. What if they don't believe me? By morning, I'd dressed in the calmest thing I owned, a navy sweater, jeans, and the kind of coat that said I had nothing to hide. I made sure Lucas had his breakfast, packed him some snacks, and asked my neighbor Gwen if she could sit with him for a couple hours. She didn't hesitate. Then I left. The snow crunched under my boots with that same cold finality I felt in my chest. I held the manila envelope tight in one hand, the flash drive in the other, like I was carrying something radioactive. Because, in a way, I was. At the Child Protective Services building, the lobby was sterile. Pale tile floors, faded chairs, a fake plant in the corner doing its best to seem alive. The woman at the front desk looked up with a neutral expression. I didn't give her time to ask why I was there. I have evidence of prolonged child endangerment, I said, straight and flat. That made her blink. She asked me to wait a moment and disappeared through a side door. A few minutes later, a caseworker introduced herself, Mrs. Dyer, mid-50s, crisp bob haircut, and no visible nonsense in her body language. She led me into a private office without a word. We sat across from each other. The room smelled faintly like burnt coffee and floor polish. I opened the envelope and slid the transcript across the table. Then I set the flash drive beside it. I'm not making accusations, I said. I'm submitting proof. She didn't blink, didn't ask for a summary. She simply inserted the flash drive into her laptop and opened the folder marked, Don't Tell. The silence in the room grew heavier as Lucas's tiny voice came through the speaker, describing the locked room, the suffocating heat. Then Seraphine's voice, icy and certain, rang out. You'll sweat the devil out. You'll pray until you pass out. Mrs. Dyer paused the recording. Her face didn't change, but her jaw tightened just slightly. She tapped a few keys and then looked at me. "We've had previous calls about that household," she said quietly. "But nothing stuck. Until now." I felt my breath catch. "What happened with the other calls?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Just stared at the laptop screen like it might offer her an excuse. Later that evening, I was back home. Lucas had fallen asleep on the couch with a half-read comic book resting on his chest. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, every light off except the one above the sink. I went back through the hotline links, found the form to request public records, and after verifying my relation to the case, an old report popped up in my inbox. It was heavily redacted, but the words that remained turned my stomach. "There's a boy, locked up often, the heater's always on, she says it's to cure him." My hands trembled slightly as I clicked the attached audio file. It was a woman's voice, low and urgent. "Please, he's just a kid." Then, faintly in the background, another voice, male, calm, almost amused. "Sarah, your prayers are loud again." My fingers hovered over the pause button. I clicked on the location tag embedded in the file. The address matched the directory listing for a small rural church 20 minutes outside Albany. My stomach dropped. I started digging. Through old newsletters, local blogs, church registries. That's when I saw the name, Pastor Michael DeLacy. He'd written articles about moral accountability and protecting kin. One blog praised his commitment to shielding family from undeserved persecution. My chest burned. I dug deeper. Turns out he was Seraphine's cousin. He was also listed as the first point of contact for community concerns in 3 dismissed CPS cases tied to his parish. So that's how it stayed hidden. Not because no one spoke, but because the wrong person was always the one listening. I closed my laptop, suddenly nauseated. The papers I'd printed were still on the floor beside me, scattered where I'd dropped them earlier. Lucas wandered in, rubbing his eyes, then looked down at the paper with the church's name printed across the top. His face paled. "That's the man," he whispered. "That's the man who told me I was broken." I wrapped my arms around him, held him close. "Then we'll break their silence instead," I murmured into his hair. When he drifted back to sleep, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There was one name I hadn't reached out to in years, Jessica Monroe, a journalist who once covered a major scandal involving a CPS office and a faith-based charity. She'd always had a soft spot for stories no one wanted to touch. I hit call. When she answered, I skipped the pleasantries. "Jessica, I've got something. Files, transcripts, audio, and a church that's been protecting its own." There was a long pause on her end. "Where do we start?" she asked. I took a breath. "This story isn't just about me," I said. "It's about every kid they told to stay quiet." I hit send on the email with all the attachments. As I watched the progress bar fill, I thought, maybe this time the fire won't burn us. Maybe this time it'll light the truth. And just when I thought things would turn in our favor, a subpoena arrived, with my name on it, not hers. The sky was still bruised with winter gray when I heard the knock. For a split second, I thought it might be Mrs. Dyer from CPS again. Maybe they had questions. Maybe something had moved forward. But when I opened the door, it wasn't her. A man in a long coat held out a thick envelope with my name printed in bold across the front. "Are you Ms. Serafina Yarrow?" I nodded, chest tightening. "You've been served." He didn't linger, just turned and walked back toward the elevator like it was any other Tuesday. I closed the door slowly and stared at the envelope in my hand. The weight of it wasn't just physical, it was personal, legal, real. I sat down on the edge of the couch, peeled the flap open, and pulled out the papers. Respondent, Serafina Yarrow. Allegation, unlawful custody of minor. Petitioner, Seraphine L. Yarrow. The words bled into each other as my eyes scanned the rest. Family court, immediate hearing, custody dispute. I felt cold all over. Behind me, I heard Lucas's socked feet shuffle on the hardwood. He peeked in, his small hands clutching his worn dinosaur plush. "You look like you saw a ghost," he whispered. I tried to smile, failed. "It's paperwork, baby. Just something I have to go deal with." "Is it because of me?" That cracked me wide open. I shook my head quickly, blinking hard. No. You didn't do anything wrong. Some people just don't understand us yet." He nodded slowly, like he wanted to believe me. Then he climbed onto the couch and tucked himself close, resting his head on my arm. We sat like that until the clock ticked us past breakfast time, and I knew I had to stand up and fight again. By noon, we were walking into Albany Family Court. The building smelled like old paint and polished wood, the kind of place where justice is supposed to live, but too often gets lost in paperwork. I wore a plain black dress and coat, no makeup, no jewelry, just truth. When we entered the courtroom, Seraphine was already seated. She looked curated, her hair curled just so, a soft blue sweater draped over her shoulders like she'd borrowed it from a Lifetime movie. Her lawyer, slick suit, smooth voice, stood as the judge entered. "Your Honor," he began, "my client is a devoted mother. She made the difficult decision to let her sister care for her son temporarily, but instead of support, she was met with betrayal. Ms. Yarrow has used this child to launch a vendetta." I felt my fists clench at my sides. Seraphine dabbed her eyes with a tissue. No smudged makeup, no real tears. "She made Lucas say awful things. She twisted him against me. I've never hurt my son. He's just sensitive." The judge glanced toward me. I met his eyes, calm, unblinking. A woman in a navy pantsuit rose from the row behind us. "Your Honor," she said, "I'm the court-appointed child advocate in this matter. Before continuing these statements, I believe it's imperative we review a piece of material provided to Child Protective Services." The judge nodded slowly. "Let's take a look." A clerk brought over the flash drive, the one I'd turned in just 2 days earlier. My stomach turned as the screen was wheeled in. Lucas reached for my hand under the table. I gripped it tight. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly, and the clip began to play. It was grainy, time-stamped. 2:12 a.m., December 24th. Lucas's small voice crackled from the speaker. "Please let me out. Please. I can't breathe." You could see him crouched near the furnace, sweat on his forehead, lips dry and cracked, body shaking. He looked tiny, fragile. And in the background, clear and unmistakable, Seraphine's voice, off-key, slow, singing, "Silent Night." The room froze. Even the rustle of papers stopped. You could have heard a snowflake hit the floor. From across the aisle, Seraphine suddenly gasped. "You weren't supposed to have that!" Her lawyer jumped up. "Objection, this material wasn't—" The judge cut him off. "Sit down." Silence. Then the judge turned his attention to me. "Ms. Yarrow, you will retain temporary custody while we investigate further. This matter is not resolved, but that child deserves protection." He banged the gavel. Court adjourned. Outside the courtroom, we sat on a cold bench by the vending machines. My body was shaking. Not from fear, but from release, like something had unclenched inside me. Lucas leaned his head on my shoulder and asked quietly, "Is it over now?" I looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes weren't full of fear anymore. They held something else, trust. "Not yet," I whispered, "but we're not alone anymore. That matters." We stepped outside into the fading light of afternoon. The snow had stopped. Everything felt still. And just when I thought things would turn in our favor, a new email lit up my phone. Subject, request for urgent response sender, outreachgracecornerchurch.org. That night, while Lucas finally slept soundly in the room next to mine, I stayed up on the couch, still wearing the same blouse I'd worn to court. I had reheated half a cup of coffee and was staring blankly at the steam rising when my laptop pinged with a new notification. The subject line stopped me cold. "I think you should hear this." A mother who couldn't stay silent. No sender name, no signature, just those 12 words. I hesitated before clicking. My cursor hovered, my breath shallow. After everything today, Seraphine's crocodile tears, the courtroom tension, Lucas gripping my hand like a life raft, I wasn't sure I had anything left in me. But I clicked anyway. It was an audio file, just 1 minute and 17 seconds long. I plugged in my headphones and sat back, the living room dim except for the glow of the screen. As the clip started, the first voice was unmistakable. Seraphine. Her tone wasn't sweet or teary like in court. It was sharp, flippant, like she was trying to sound clever in front of someone she wanted to impress. "Kids like him need to be scared sometimes," she said. "That's the only way they learn. He gets too soft if you baby him." There was a pause, then laughter, another woman's voice, dry and amused. "He should be grateful," that voice said. "Nobody wanted him. You gave him a roof. What else does he want? Pity?" I hit pause. My hands clenched so hard, the headphone wire nearly snapped. It wasn't just what they said, it was how they said it. Like Lucas was some inconvenience, like pain was something he deserved. I stared at the screen. The audio file blinked silently at me, daring me to do something with it. I stood up, pulled the headphones off, and walked to the window. Outside, the streets were slick with slush, orange light reflecting off the snowbanks from the nearby diner. The world felt still. But inside my chest it wasn't. For a long time I just stood there, arms crossed, trying to reason with myself. "You already won," I muttered. "The judge gave you temporary custody. Why push more?" Another voice in me added, quieter, crueler, "What if she gets him back next time? What if they believe her again?" I thought of the holidays we'd never share again with the rest of the family, of Lucas growing up without cousins or birthday parties, of all the effort it would take to start over with just the two of us. Part of me wanted to let it go, just delete the file, protect whatever threadbare piece we had left. But then I heard a small noise behind me. Lucas was awake, not crying, just quiet. I turned to see him sitting cross-legged on the rug, coloring. He didn't notice me watching at first. He was focused, pressing a crayon so hard it snapped. He looked at the broken crayon, then down at the picture. It was of an angel, except the wings were scribbled out in thick black. I crouched down slowly beside him. "Hey, sweetheart," I said gently. "Why'd you cross out the wings?" He didn't answer at first. Then, still looking at the paper, he said, "I asked God for help. I asked him every night in the basement. I don't think he listens to kids like me." It felt like something inside me shattered. All the exhaustion, all the courtroom stress, all the careful holding it together I'd done, gone in a breath. I wrapped my arms around him, pulling him close. "Baby." "God hears the broken first," I whispered, the words tumbling out of some deep, buried place in my memory. It was something our mother used to say when we were little, back when prayer wasn't about saving face but about hope, real, fragile hope. Lucas blinked up at me. "You think so?" I nodded, pressing my cheek to his temple. "I know so, and I'm sorry I made you think otherwise." We stayed like that for a while, his small hands tangled in the sleeve of my sweater. Later, after I tucked him back into bed, I returned to the laptop. The audio file still sat open on the screen. I clicked forward, typed in the CPS email I had on file, attached the audio. Then I added a short note. "This wasn't the only time, and I'm done keeping peace at the cost of a child's voice." I hit send. Then I opened my journal, the one I hadn't touched in months. On the first clean page, I wrote, "Truth is not war. Silence is." The morning crept in without permission, dull and gray, its silence broken only by the soft clink of a knife spreading jam across toast. I'd barely slept. After forwarding that email to CPS the night before, I sat for hours staring at my journal, running Seraphine's voice over and over in my head. That hollow, smug laugh. The way she said, "Nobody wanted him." It clung to me like smoke. Lucas was still in his pajamas, curled on the couch with his stuffed dog tucked beneath his chin. His hair was a wild mess, and his eyes looked distant, like he was somewhere else. Somewhere not here. I didn't ask where, I just let him be. As I set his toast down on the table and reached for mine, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated. Then came the second sound, a firm knock at the door, 2 sharp raps, not impatient but deliberate. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and crossed to the front door. Through the peephole I saw her. Seraphine, in a sharp scarlet wool coat with brass buttons that looked like they belonged to another century. Her lips wore that familiar smile, the one that always meant she was 5 moves ahead. To her left stood a tall, balding man with a leather briefcase in hand. On her right, a face I vaguely recognized from one of the church flyers, Deacon Grant, I think, mild-mannered, graying at the temples. I cracked the door just wide enough to speak. "You're early for Judgment Day." Seraphine didn't flinch. "Seraphina, we're here to talk, before this gets any more dangerous for you." I opened the door wider. "Is that a threat?" Her lawyer answered, stepping forward and offering a manila envelope. "This is a cease and desist. Effective immediately, you are to refrain from spreading false information that damages Ms. Darrow's reputation. Any violation may lead to legal proceedings." He said it calmly, like he was reciting from a grocery list. His glasses slid a bit on his nose. I didn't take the envelope, just stared at it. The deacon cleared his throat, shifting uneasily. "We're hoping to find a peaceable resolution. These kinds of accusations, they can destroy lives, ministries. Sometimes a simple misunderstanding gets twisted." "A misunderstanding?" My voice came out lower than I intended. "Did you listen to the clip?" Seraphine leaned in slightly. "You'll apologize, retract it, and promise not to make further noise, or we escalate. Your choice." I stood there, still holding the door open, toast now cold behind me, Lucas still silent in the other room. And for a moment I wondered if it was worth it, if any of it was. I'd already been sliced away from my family like fat-off meat. Maybe letting it die quietly was better than bleeding out every day. Then I heard footsteps. Small ones. Lucas stepped into the hall, dragging his stuffed dog by the ear. He blinked up at the strangers, then turned his gaze to me. He said, quiet but firm, "I told them I was scared, and they laughed." The room stopped. Even the lawyer blinked like he hadn't expected to hear anything from a child. Seraphine's hand twitched near her coat buttons. The deacon paled. Lucas looked back down at his stuffed animal and stepped closer to me, resting his head against my side. I looked at him, and my breath caught. The angel he'd drawn last night with no wings flashed in my mind. He'd crossed them out like he'd given up hope. But now, he spoke. He stood. He took the first step toward reclaiming those wings. I knelt beside him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "No more fear," I said, clear enough for everyone to hear. "Not in this house." Seraphine's lips parted, but the confidence drained from her eyes. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone, lifted it slightly like she was about to record. That's when another voice cut through. "Morning, folks," Ms. Carey called out from her doorway just down the hall. She wore her slippers and a worn college sweatshirt, mug of tea in hand. Seraphine froze. Carey took a sip. "You might want to be real careful what you say, Seraphine. Sound travels in this building, and I've got a good memory. Always have." Seraphine's lawyer turned his head, now looking wary. Carey tilted her chin toward Lucas. "I saw that boy 2 weeks ago in the stairwell. He had bruises on his arm. I remember thinking, that ain't from no fall. I keep my mouth shut most days, but this? Nah. You try to drag this through court, you'll find me sitting in the witness box." The deacon shifted his weight. "Ms. Carey, let's not jump to conclusions." "No one's jumping, sweetheart," she replied. "Just saying I heard more than y'all wish I did." Seraphine's face hardened. Her lawyer leaned close and whispered something into her ear. Whatever he said made her jaw tighten. I stood, slowly, gently nudging Lucas behind me. I looked Seraphine in the eye. "You have until noon to pull that letter back. If you don't, I go to the press. I've got audio, I've got CPS, and now I've got neighbors who aren't afraid to speak." Then I shut the door, locked it, and stood there with my hand on the doorknob until I heard them walk away. Lucas was staring at me. "Mom?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I bent down, hugged him tight, and whispered back, "You were brave. I'm proud of you." He didn't say anything, but when I pulled back, his drawing from last night had reappeared. This time, lying on the side table, he'd drawn the angel again, with wings. That afternoon, I was still sitting at the edge of the couch, staring at the locked door. The echo of Seraphine's heels had long faded down the hallway, but the aftershock clung to the apartment like humidity before a storm. I hadn't moved much, just enough to tuck Lucas under a blanket on the love seat. He'd fallen asleep holding his stuffed dog again, his thumb resting near the stitched ear, just like he did when he was a toddler. I was about to stand up and reheat some soup when my phone buzzed again. Blocked number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something in me didn't. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered, steady and calm. "Hi, ma'am. I hope I'm not intruding. I was working dispatch the night of December 24th. I was the one who took the pizza call. From your son." I froze. She paused, like she knew the weight of what she was saying. Then gently added, "There's something I think you should hear." I lowered myself into the chair without answering. My hands went cold against the wood arms. "We do routine reviews of non-traditional emergency calls for training purposes," she explained, and I couldn't shake the way he said something. I whispered, "What part?" She asked if she could replay it. I nodded instinctively, though she couldn't see me. Then the audio clicked in. It was Lucas's voice, small, whispery, like he was hiding under a table. "She said the angel has no wings, 'cause she cut them off." The dispatcher muted the line. That line made the whole room freeze. He didn't say it like a story. He said it like truth. I gripped the cushion beneath me. In that moment, everything around me slowed. The noise from the street dimmed, the shadows in the room shifted, and somewhere in the back of my mind, every time Lucas had drawn that angel came roaring back. No wings, always crying, always in the corner of the page. The angel without wings. "That's what he's been drawing," I said aloud, more to myself than to her. Over and over. In corners, on napkins, behind math homework. "He was trying to speak in the only language he had," she said quietly. I swallowed hard. And I let her near him. I let that woman in his life. I told myself it was temporary. I thought, if I was there too, it was safe. The dispatcher didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. She knew. I knew. I thanked her, my voice cracking, and asked if she could send the clip officially. She promised she would, along with the timestamp and her own incident report. We ended the call, and I just sat there. Lucas stirred slightly, still asleep. His little hands clutched his drawing pad. I reached over and gently slid it out just enough to peek. Another angel, another pair of broken wings. And suddenly, the ache in my chest wasn't just grief. It was clarity. I had wasted too many months playing polite, shielding people who never once protected my child. My phone buzzed again. I half expected it to be the dispatcher. It wasn't. It was from Seraphine's attorney. Subject line, "Final notice before action, child custody and defamation claim." I didn't even open the attachment. I didn't need to. The title was enough to tell me she was going all in, trying to take Lucas, blaming me for emotional distress, pretending to be the wounded party. I didn't shake. Not this time. Instead, I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and opened my laptop. I typed, "Emergency filing, audio evidence, minor endangerment." Then attached the dispatcher's clip, the drawings, witness list, photos from the day Lucas had bruises I'd stupidly chalked up to clumsy play. I added Carrie's statement from earlier. She'd already offered to submit a notarized account. Then I stared at the "to" line for a moment and forwarded the entire file to my lawyer. Next, I copied the audio clip alone into a message and texted Seraphine directly. I wrote, "You made Lucas draw angels with no wings. Let's see how well that plays in court." I hit send. Then I turned toward the living room. Lucas had rolled onto his side, eyes still closed but brows furrowed. I walked over, sat beside him, and gently pulled the blanket higher up his shoulder. He mumbled something. I leaned in. "You didn't just order a pizza," I whispered. "You ordered freedom." His eyes opened slowly. "You heard me?" "I hear you now," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in days. He nodded once and curled closer. Just as I stood to head into the kitchen, a knock sounded at the door. Firm, measured. I opened it slowly. A man in a dark suit held up a sealed envelope. "Seraphina Monroe?" he asked. "Yes." "You've been summoned. Family court. Emergency hearing. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. He handed me the papers, turned, and walked down the hall without another word. I closed the door, pressed my back against it, and looked down at the summons. The war wasn't over, but it was about to become very, very public. I took a deep breath and adjusted the scarf around Lucas's neck as we stepped into the cold morning air. The courthouse loomed ahead, gray and sterile, but I kept my spine straight. This wasn't just about custody anymore. It was about truth, about a boy who had quietly cried for help and finally been heard. Lucas clutched my hand tightly as we walked through the glass doors. He wore the navy coat with the patches he loved, the one that made him feel like a superhero. I hadn't told him what to say, hadn't even asked him to speak. I just told him the truth, that today, we weren't hiding anymore. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Seraphine sat at the front with two lawyers, her hair perfectly styled, expression unreadable. She didn't look at us. She didn't have to. That smirk on her face told me everything. I kept my gaze forward and found our seats. My attorney nodded at me, sliding over a folder. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't on paper. It was sitting beside me, swinging his feet just above the floor, trying to look brave. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the edge of Lucas's angel drawing. Folded, soft from being held so many times. It stayed there like armor. The wings he'd added last night were clumsy, colorful, too big for the body. But I'd cried when I saw them. "All rise?" The judge entered, stern face, thinning hair, glasses low on the bridge of his nose. He glanced across the room once before taking his seat. The hearing began. Our attorney spoke first, then Seraphine's. She leaned over and whispered something to one of them, lips barely moving, then sat back with arms crossed. I could see her tapping one manicured nail against her coffee cup. Then came the witnesses. The 911 dispatcher appeared on the screen via remote call. She introduced herself calmly. The judge nodded. "We reviewed the emergency call placed by the minor, Lucas Monroe," she said clearly. "And upon request, I'd like to share a specific portion." A quiet filled the room. Everyone leaned forward just a little. From the speakers came Lucas's small voice. "Can I get a pepperoni pizza?" A few quiet chuckles rippled through the gallery, but the dispatcher didn't flinch. Then came the whisper. "She said the angel has no wings, 'cause she cut them off." The audio ended. No one laughed now. My breath caught again, even though I'd heard it before. I looked over at Seraphine. Her eyes narrowed, but her face was blank. "She said it like he truly believed it," the dispatcher added. "It's something we couldn't ignore." Next, a representative from Child Services stood. "There were prior concerns reported, but no formal investigation proceeded at the time. The family was considered reputable, but in light of recent evidence, we were wrong." That acknowledgement felt like a quiet thunder. Then something unexpected happened. The judge looked down at Lucas. "Would you like to say anything, young man? Only if you want to." I reached for his hand. He looked at me, unsure. I nodded. Lucas slid off the bench, walked slowly toward the microphone, and stood on his tiptoes. The bailiff adjusted it for him. He looked straight ahead, toward Seraphine. "She made me sleep in the laundry room," he said plainly. "She told me Mom didn't want me anymore." A collective murmur broke out. Someone gasped. Lucas's voice didn't waver. "She said angels can't run away if you cut their wings." He turned toward me. "But Mom came. She heard me." I felt something inside me break and heal at the same time. I didn't cry. I just nodded at him, my brave, beautiful son. The judge took a breath. He tapped his pen once, then looked at the courtroom with an expression I hadn't seen all day, something like quiet fury. "Effective immediately, full custody is granted to Ms. Seraphina Monroe. A no-contact order is hereby issued against Ms. Seraphine Arlen pending further investigation." Seraphine stood up so fast her chair screeched. "He's a child! He doesn't understand what he's saying!" The judge didn't flinch. "He understood more than most adults ever do." The gavel came down like thunder. Court adjourned. As I stood, still stunned, the judge passed close by. He slowed for a moment, just enough to whisper, "My daughter once called 911 after I left her with my mother. I didn't listen then, but I listened today. Your son saved himself. And you." He walked on without waiting for a reply. Back home, Lucas kicked off his shoes and ran into the kitchen. I followed slowly, still processing the weight of it all. He reached up and tugged the old angel sketch from the fridge. "Can I fix it?" he asked. I nodded. He grabbed his crayons, sat at the table, and started adding wings. Messy, uneven, bright. But they were there. I stood behind him and wrapped my arms around his shoulders. "You've always had wings," I whispered. "They just needed space." Later that night, after he fell asleep, I opened the keepsake box and placed the pizza flyer inside, the one with the emergency number still circled in red. "You didn't just order food that night," I murmured. "You served them the truth." The apartment was quiet. Just the hum of the fridge, the softness of the evening light pouring through the window, and the gentle rise and fall of my son's breathing. Sometimes it's the quietest voices that shatter the loudest lies. My son didn't just call for help, he called for hope. And this time, the world listened. Have you ever seen a child speak the truth when no one else would? Would you have believed him or dismissed it as a child's imagination? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And remember, silence protects the wrong people. Don't be silent when it matters.